So hopefully we haven't baffled you too much with the agriculture transition period. But we'll hand over to Shannon for a planning update, and then I'll be back with a general update a bit later.
Thanks, Polly. Hi everyone. So I thought I'd give you an update this evening on some of the amendments we've seen to the planning system recently, some that we might be seeing in the next few years, and then I'm just going to end on how to regularise situations when planning hasn't been sought. So just to start with, some of you may have heard Boris Johnson referring to build, 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 the government's drive to reform our planning system. It's proposed to be the most radical reform we've seen to the system since the Second World War, and it's looking to make it easier to build better homes where people supposedly want to live. There have been a series of reforms announced to the planning system in recent months as part of this drive, and many of these have been included within the white paper, and this white paper is called Planning for the Future. The white paper sets out three new pillars for the future of planning, and it's looking to review how development is planned and bring a focus to design and sustainability. It's also looking to make planning more accessible through digitalisation, and also looking to reform how infrastructure associated with development can be delivered in the form of a new levy. And this new levy is going to look to capture the land value uplift created by a planning approval, and then use this to enhance infrastructure in a local area. So just to focus a little bit on this proposed infrastructure levy, what we do know about it is it's going to replace the current system that we currently have that is based on negotiation and tariffs at a local level. It's going to replace these with a nationally fixed and mandatory levy. And the levy is going to be based on the projected gross development value from each site, and then local authorities are going to be able to borrow from this levy to provide the necessary infrastructure and affordable housing for a local area. It is anticipated there are going to be thresholds. So for example, there'll be a lower value threshold where the levy wouldn't be liable, and this is hoping to avoid impacting viability of schemes in weaker markets. So I also just wanted to touch on the proposal to maybe or most likely move our planning system to a zonal planning system. So a zonal system is already an established concept in many countries around the world, and what it does is it looks to govern development through a predetermined set of rules, whereas our existing planning system in England is much more discretionary, and decisions are made on planning on a case-by-case basis generally. So it is proposed that England would have 3 different zones if we were in a zonal planning system, with the first being a growth area. In these areas, it would be considered that these areas are suitable for substantial development, and so planning applications would automatically be granted to developments that meet the criteria and requirements of a local plan for that area. We've then got renewal areas that would be suitable for some development, and finally protection areas, and these will look to restrict development. And I think we can assume that these protection areas will probably have a similar set of rules and legislation to those that we already see in greenbelt areas perhaps. To ensure design and quality aren't going to be sacrificed through a new zonal system, councils are going to be required to agree both a master plan and a design code for any site located within a growth area. But I think an obvious criticism to make of the proposal to go to a zonal system is it's likely to erode the role of local democracy in our planning system. So for example, any applications submitted within a growth area, it would no longer be open to comments from the public. The public instead will be encouraged to comment at the earlier stage when the master plan and design codes are being made. So the consultation on the white paper has ended now. It ended at the end of October. The feedback is still being analysed. There's been an awful lot of criticism on it and its proposals, in particularly from the RTPI. And one thing for me really is, while the paper does acknowledge that the planning system is slow and inefficient, it doesn't really address the fact that over 10 million homes have been granted planning permission in the last 10 years and they haven't been built. So just to touch on another amendment we're expecting to see within the planning system. Following a DEFRA consultation at the end of 2018, the Environment Bill that is currently going through Parliament at the moment proposes to formally implement biodiversity offsetting within the planning system. And what this means is certain developments will be required to demonstrate a biodiversity net gain through the use of either habitat creations on site, habitat enhancements, mitigating against harm of existing habitats, or even through financial contributions. And the Environment Bill is going to ensure that this is mandatory by introducing a new condition onto most new developments. This condition will require developers and applicants to provide a biodiversity net gain plan. And as part of this plan, the council will likely only approve these if there is a 10% increase in biodiversity value. And the plans will also need to demonstrate that these can be managed for a minimum of 30 years once development is complete. So there are going to be exceptions to the net gain requirement. It's likely that permitted development applications and household applications and those on brownfield sites won't need to show biodiversity net gain. Neither will those that are considered nationally significant infrastructure projects, such as those in relation to East-West Rail. And also smaller sites are expected to have a lower requirement, likely less than the 10%. The reason I have flagged biodiversity net gain this evening is because there is maybe an opportunity to be seen here, because we know that not every site will be able to provide the net gain on site. It's likely that developers may be looking for land elsewhere, maybe nearby developments, to either create habitats or put this towards their net gain. So I think it's something to look out for, definitely. So just moving on to one of the reforms we've already seen this year, and that is to the amendments that have been made to the existing use class order in September. So use classes were established in the late 80s, and what they do is they put uses of land and buildings into different categories. So the amendments we've seen are mainly in response to the changing face of the high street, and it's looking to sort of make it easier for the high street to change and come up to the times. We've seen the merging of several existing uses into 3 main classes, and I've just listed these on the slide. So the number one class really to focus on is Class E. It's the largest class we've actually seen, and it includes commercial, business and service uses. We've then got F1 and F2, which I think are a little bit less relevant for this evening. And we already have sui generis as a use class, and it's kind of seen as the none of the above category. This has been extended now to include bars and pubs, as well as venues such as cinemas and concert halls. So if you aren't already aware, you don't require planning permission to change a use that's within the same use class. So it's hopeful that these amendments are going to see a reduction in a large number of applications clogging up the planning system, but it also does represent quite a significant opportunity really to diversify existing uses in response to changing demand and changing markets. So for example, if you have a farm shop or office on your holding, under the new Class E rules, you would be able to change this to either a building, housing and industrial process, a gym, and vice versa. You could change a gym to an office or a farm shop. In addition to the amendments that we've seen to the use class order, we've also seen some amendments made to permitted development rights. We haven't seen any in relation to agricultural buildings or their change of use, but we have seen the introduction of a new right. And this new right essentially enables the demolition of redundant office spaces and light industrial spaces and enables them to be rebuilt as dwellings. So I think an opportunity to take here really would be if you have buildings that are in a commercial use on your holding that have been vacant for 6 months or have nearly been vacant for 6 months, there's now an opportunity to demolish these and replace them with dwellings without planning permission. So just to make use of this right, it's key to note the old building can't be any larger than 1,000 square metres. It can't be any taller than 18 metres. It must have been built before 1990. It can't be in a conservation area, a triple SI or an AONB. So in addition to that right, we're also seeing now that permitted development rights are enabling the upward extension of post-war built homes by up to 2 stories. We can also use this right above existing terrace blocks, shops and offices without the need for planning permission. So I think an opportunity to take here is, rather than extending your dwelling outwards, you can now obviously extend it upwards, create more bedrooms and space. I think this could be something to look into rather than going for a new dwelling on site. Maybe explore the option of just increasing the height of your dwelling. Both of these new permitted rights do require prior approval from the council in a very similar way that it is for new agricultural buildings and their conversion. And I did just want to flag up something about space standards. So on the 30th of September, the Housing Secretary did announce that any new homes built through permitted development rights, they do now need to meet national space standards. And the reason I'm flagging this up really is just in case you are considering the conversion of an agricultural building to residential dwelling, it's just something to think about really. We don't have a date as to when this is coming in, but it may be an idea to bring plans forward to avoid this. And just while I'm talking about permitted development rights, I thought I'd provide a bit of a refresher on the existing rights. So part 6 of the General Permitted Development Order focuses solely on agriculture and forestry. So under Class A, if your holding is larger than 5 hectares, you are able to erect, extend or alter an agricultural building. And these new buildings can't be any larger than 1,000 square metres. If your holding is less than 5 hectares, you then fall into the Class B category. And this enables you to extend or alter an agricultural building, but unfortunately it doesn't enable you to put one up without planning permission. We've then got part 3 of the General Permitted Development Order, and this focuses on changes of use. So classes Q, R and S are the classes that mainly focus on the conversion of agricultural buildings. I think the most well known is most likely Class Q, and this enables the conversion of agricultural buildings to up to 5 dwellings. You are limited on space, you can't go any larger than 465 square metres, and you must be able to demonstrate that your building was previously used for agriculture on or before the 20th of March 2013. And just something from me really, if you are considering converting an agricultural building to a dwelling, I would always recommend that you're able to demonstrate the building is structurally sound before doing so. We've then got Class R, enabling the conversion of agricultural buildings to commercial use. Similarly, you need to demonstrate that the building was in agricultural use on or before the 3rd of July 2012, and the change of use can't be any larger than 500 square metres. Lastly, we've got, I think, the lesser known Class S, and this enables you to convert agricultural buildings to a state-funded school or nursery. And there's significant benefits really of exploring permitted development rights and utilising these rather than going for full planning. They are definitely a much simpler application. They're considerably quicker to get through the system, and they're much cheaper. So they're certainly an easier way to get farm development through the planning system. And I just thought I'd end really giving a sort of brief explanation as to how you can regularise a situation where you may have undertaken a development or a change of use without planning. We do see it a lot, it's quite easily done. The legislation is confusing at times, and I think some people don't realise that when something is permitted, they still do need to apply to the council for prior approval. And if you haven't applied to the council for prior approval, you can't do this retrospectively. So I've prepared the flowchart, which is just on the slide, And I think the first question to ask yourself really is, what have you done? Have you developed a new building or structure, or have you changed the use of a building to a dwelling? If yes, did you do this more than 4 years ago? If yes again, then we'd be able to regularise this and remediate the breach of planning by going for a certificate of lawful use. If no, we'd have to go for a retrospective planning application. And then if you've done anything other than the two listed, such as change the use of a building to storage or light industrial use, if yes, was this undertaken more than 10 years ago? If yes again, then we'd have to go for the certificate of lawful use. And if no, we'd have to go for a retrospective planning application. So just to sort of point out the differences between the two, both have the same determination period of 8 weeks, and both have the same application fee. But with a certificate of lawful use, it's really key to note it's actually a planning matter. It's a legal matter rather than a planning matter. And the first thing we'd need to know is when the date of the breach begun. We'd then need significant evidence of that breach. So this could be in the form of a license or tenancy agreement, utility bills, evidence of rent being paid, or simply photographs. I've also found sort of in the past that Google Earth can be quite a useful tool to use. It does obviously have satellite images going back over a period of time, and something as simple as showing car parking on a site can really help a situation. And then a retrospective planning application would obviously be considered as any other planning application. It would be considered against the local plan policies and national policies at that time, even if the development was carried out, say, 5 years ago. And as the application would be treated as any other application, it would be open to a consultation process. It would be open to comments from your neighbours and the council's consultees. So if you are over the time thresholds that I pointed out in the previous slide, I would obviously advise going for a certificate of lawful use over a planning application. I understand this isn't always usually the case if planning enforcement is sought before the time elapses, but if anyone does have any questions on these, please feel free to contact me and we can analyse them on a case-by-case basis. So I'm just going to hand back to Polly now